Hello, friends. This episode was originally recorded just before the COVID-19 pandemic began. Because there have been so many changes globally since, I reached out to Robin and asked him if he'd like to join me for a second chat to find out how the coronavirus has affected his world as a pilot. He was kind enough to say yes, and so the episode is being presented in order. First, our original fun conversation recorded a few months ago, followed immediately by our second chat just a few days ago. Please enjoy. Welcome to the Memories of a Moonbird podcast, exploring life one story at a time. Hello, friends. Today on the show, he flies everything from jets to helicopters to seaplanes, and over his 30-year career so far has accumulated more than 10,000 hours in the air. Talk about being a moonbird. These days, he flies celebrities and dignitaries all over the world as the captain of a Gulfstream private jet. But he's not only lived an incredibly exciting life in the skies over planet Earth, he's also a passionate traveler, photographer, adventurer, actor, and fellow technology lover. And I gotta tell you, he's just a really nice guy. Here to talk about life, travel, and what it's like to be in the cockpit, please welcome my friend, Captain Robin Leabman. Robin, welcome to the show.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. So let's start off. Where are you from?
I grew up in Polson, Montana, and split time between Northwest Montana and St. Louis, Missouri, because my dad and stepmother lived there, and my mom and stepdad lived up in Montana. So I would go to school, high school and whatnot, up in Montana and learn to fly up there. But then I do summers over in St. Louis.
Now, did you fly from Montana to St. Louis?
I did that when I was a senior in high school.
You must have been the coolest kid in high school.
Nope. No, I was a nerd. I was a dork. If there was a chess club, I would have been in it.
Well, I'll tell you what, we would have been friends in high school because I would have been like, dude,
yeah,
can I come fly in your plane? That's so rad.
I'm going to validate my nerdery in high school. I was on the speech and debate team. And I was in the newspaper. I was in band, marching band, jazz band.
What'd you play?
Trombone.
Nice.
Yeah.
Jolene plays trombone.
No, what?
I'm a tuba player. Low brass kicks ass, brother.
Yeah, it does. Bass clef.
So what made you fall in love with flying in the first place?
When I was 10 years old, I was in St. Louis or in Missouri during one of those summers. And my dad had a friend that had a Cessna 180, Cessna 185. It was a four-seat tail dragger Cessna. And took me up. And I already knew I was interested in flying. I think Top Gun had already come out, and I had already watched that about 657 times. And he took me up in the plane, and I was able to take the controls. And I knew, 10 years old, I said, yes, this is what I'm going to do. That is until I fell in love with theater as well. Then I got confused.
Well, now you have to write and direct a movie about being a pilot.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I could do that.
What do you think you're most passionate about in life now versus when you were 10 years old?
It probably hasn't changed, except I know that I probably won't be an astronaut. So
I wanted to be Buck Rogers when I was a kid.
I wanted to be Neil Armstrong, but that job was already taken. So I still love what I do. I love to fly, and I fly big private jets and helicopters, and I love it. I really do.
What's your favorite thing about it? Is there one thing that stands out above others?
What I really love the most about flying is just I love firing up that APU. And
what's an APU?
Oh, sorry. So I love firing up the auxiliary power unit. It's a smaller jet engine that doesn't produce any thrust. It's a jet turbine that turns a generator, and it's an air compressor that sends air through the air conditioning system. It's basically what keeps the airplane alive when the engines aren't running. And then the APU also provides the starting power or the starting air to get the engines turning to start the engines. A lot of us joke, our favorite part of the day, our favorite sound is when the APU fires up. And then at the end of the day, our favorite sound is when the APU shuts down.
What does it sound like when it shuts down?
When it shuts down, first it's this really high pitch, and then when it shuts down, it says,
That's awesome. I feel like I was right there. Where's the first place you traveled outside your hometown?
Well, hometown was Polson. And so traveling outside of Polson was going to St. Louis. And then there were always trips to Spokane, road trips and whatnot. But first trip, like getting on an airplane and really going somewhere, Wow, I didn't really do that when I was growing up. There were no trips to Europe. There were no trips to out of the country. In fact, the first time I left the country, I was doing an internship with Trans World Airlines in 1997.
Wow.
That was the first time I got a passport and left the country. And not only did I do it, but I did it alone.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
What do you think has been the most rewarding thing about traveling for you as a pilot?
Being able to see places that I never would have the budget or the time to go see. And I suppose the nice thing about it is that I don't have to decide. It's not like I have to stand in front of a map and go, gosh, where do we want to go? And then have take it to the committee, talk to the wife about it and be like, oh, well, I want to go do this. Well, I kind of want, sunny beaches and everything. Oh, well, I want to go do an ecotourism. It's just the decision's made. The client or the boss wants to go to Iceland. Wait, actually, I was the one that put that idea in the client's head to go to Iceland because I wanted to go to Iceland. So that was a bad example. But except for Iceland, the clients know where they want to go. And I bring them there. And now all I have to do is look up, what do I want to do when I'm there? Where do I want to eat? And how much of that time do I want to spend relaxing or recharging before I go do the next fun thing?
Now, question for you. Let's say, I know you've taken a great many dignitaries, celebrities, famous people all around the world. Let's say someone super famous, hires you to take them to London for a week. They want to go to London for a week. During that week, after you land, are you then there in London while they're on vacation doing their thing?
Yes. When I flew charter, there were times that you'd see on the schedule, oh, there's going to be a 10-day trip to Nice, and you're planning on 10 days in Nice. But then you get there, and just when you're settling in and you're going to put your adventures together, dispatch calls and says, oh, hey, now we need you to go to London and pick up another client and bring them over to Sicily, and then you need to do this. And the next thing you know, you're just working for 10 straight days. Now I got out of charter, and now I fly corporate. I fly a boss, and when he goes somewhere for 7 days, I'm there for 7 days.
What's one of the coolest experiences you had taking somebody famous around?
I have so many. It's
everyone loves good gossip, Robin.
Right. All right. Don't get the dustpan out yet because I'm going to try not to drop any names. So I was flying this extremely famous, world famous singer. And we were flying him around on his US tour. This is back in, I think, 2013. And he had just played I think like Detroit or something. Mm-hmm. And boy, that's a whole story right there. Just a thing we had with the airplane and icing. And we had to actually get a police escort to bring de-icing trucks from Dallas Metro to the Detroit Metro airport to the smaller airport in Detroit that we were at. So, and only because we were flying this person were we able to get a police escort to bring de-icing trucks over to our little airport where we were at to de-ice the airplane. Anyway, that's a little sidebar. So I was flying this very famous sir, and after he had played and arrived back at the airplane, he asks, I was a co-pilot at the time, he asked the captain and I, he said, hey, what are you guys doing for Thanksgiving, which was the next day? And we said, oh, well, we're staying at a really nice JW Marriott, so they're going to have, something for all the guests that are staying in the hotel during Thanksgiving. He says, no. You're going to have dinner with me. And so he invited us to have Thanksgiving dinner with him.
Wow.
And his kids, and then just a really small group of people, like maybe one of the guys from his security detail, and I think his makeup artist was there, and that was about it. It was 10 of us having this wonderful feast prepared by by a professional chef. And here I'm sitting right next to this world famous singer, having a conversation with him about my parents of all things. And he was great. I wish I could tell you who it was,
okay.
but
That's
it
really
was
cool.
I have so many stories like that. I mean, these famous people, when you're around them all the time, you realize that they're just people.
Just like everybody else. Yeah.
They have different problems than the rest of us,
Sure.
but they're just people. At the end of the day, they want to take good care of their kids, and they can be very generous and outgoing when it hasn't been in their face all day. And And I suppose that's what my job is as their captain, is someone that knows, that gives them the service that they're expecting on the airplane, but also knowing when I'm welcome to talk to them, and also knowing when they want their space, but also making sure that I'm aware of that before they have to say anything.
Anticipating needs is, I think, a really important part of good customer service anywhere.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I'm curious, what was your favorite childhood book?
I loved, off the top of my head, Dr. Seuss. Growing up, I was really close to my cousins, and they grew up in Spokane, Washington, which was about a 3-hour drive from where I grew up in Montana. And there was this book that we loved to read when we were kids, and it was called Snow. And it was this simple book, and it was just about snow. And I remember it. I remember most of it very well. It would be snow, snow. Look at the snow. Do you like snow in your face? Yes, I like it any place. And so then we learned at a very, very young age that if we replace the word snow with poop or shit, when that word came up, or pee, or puke, and we would start, it was Mad Libs before Mad Libs was ever invented.
Wait, are either of your cousins married now?
Scott is married. He's a year younger than me, has 2 kids, and he lives up in Truckee.
Well, when the other cousin gets married, you have to stand up and recite this poem, or this book, but with one of the other curse words. That would be hilarious.
I think I will.
That is amazing.
And it was, we would read that book for hours on end, just throwing the worst words that we possibly could into it. And what's so funny is we're in our 40s, and we still talk about that book. We'll still quote that book. We'll just get together for dinner and we'll be talking, and all of a sudden one of us will be like, poop, 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 look at the poop. Do you like poop in your face? Yes, I like it any place.
Oh, man. Okay. You mentioned at some point that you have a really interesting story about how you were named. Let's hear it.
So when I was in high school, I think it was my junior or senior year, in English class, we needed to pick some books and read books, and I'd already read all the Stephen King's novels up to that point in time in the 90s. And I had read The Exorcist. I don't know why. I was just going through my horror phase.
Yeah, lighthearted stuff.
Right, really lighthearted stuff. And then I was just stuck. I didn't know any other genre. I just always did like these mystery, suspense, horror sort of books from when I really started reading. And I kind of was running out of things to read, and I asked the teacher, I said, God, is there anything else I can, I need to go to the library and pick a book. She's like, no, I actually have something here in the classroom. She had a cart, I think. And there was a book that stood out, and it was called The Dove by Robin Lee Graham. And I picked up that book, and it was about this 17-year-old who sailed around the world by himself. And I think he did this in the early 70s.
True story?
True story. And he sailed around the world by himself in his sailboat and met people along the way. It was a book about travel, about people, about bravery, courage, and just exploring the great beyond. And I don't mean death. I just mean what's over the horizon. and so I was reading the book, and I took it home, and I think I read it over a day or two. And my mom said, "Oh my God, you're reading The Dove." I said, "Yeah." She says, "Well, I was reading that book when I was pregnant with you, and your father and I decided to name you after this guy, after Robin Lee Graham." And because we kind of thought Robin Leabman, and because we just, for some reason in the womb, we knew that you were going to be an explorer. And I thought that was incredible. So I finished the book. And at the very end of the book, in the acknowledgments or about the author, it says, the author currently lives on a lake in Montana and still enjoys sailing. And I went, well, that's weird. I live on a lake in northwest Montana. I live on Flathead Lake. So off of a hunch, I went to the phone book, which covered the entire Flathead Valley, and I looked up Graham, and Robin was right there in the phone book.
Wow.
And I called him, and I said, sir, I am 17 years old, and I just read your book, and I also just learned that I was named after you. And I never got a chance to ever meet him, but we chatted on the phone for probably 20 minutes, and I included that in my book report when I It was just one of those really crazy, weird happenstance things where a book that I randomly selected was the book that my mom was reading when she was pregnant, and she and my dad named me after this guy.
I love when the universe does cool stuff like that.
And he lived right up the road.
That's crazy.
He lived 40 miles north of where we live.
Man, that's awesome. Something I've always wanted to know is, how do you feel when you're flying? When your hands are on the sticks and you're in full control, what's it like?
I love it. I actually, when you fly a jet, there's another pilot. So you typically have to trade days or trade legs so that everyone gets their turn. There's times when I don't want to share. Of course I do, but I'm like, no, I want to fly all the legs. But that wouldn't be professional.
Now on a flight, because I don't think a lot of people know, and I certainly don't know, but let's say you have a flight that's 10 hours long. Mm-hmm. Obviously you're in full control during takeoff and landing. During the actual flight itself, is the computer flying the plane for you, or are you? So can you just sit back and relax, or are you?
Yeah. See, we on takeoff we hand fly the airplane, and there are some pilots who will hand fly the airplane right up to flap retraction, which happens at 400 feet, and then they hit the autopilot, and then they sit back, and now they're telling the plane where to go by twisting the knobs, the heading knob, and they're changing speed with the speed knob, and in fact that's encouraged to get the autopilot on sooner rather than later, because it frees up your first officer or the co-captain who isn't flying on that leg to be able to it helps decrease their workload when you get the autopilot on, because when you're flying the airplane, your job is to fly the airplane. When your hands are on the control yoke, autopilot's off, your job is to just fly the airplane. You're not supposed to reach up and change anything on the guidance panel. You need to ask the guy not flying. We call it the pilot monitoring, where you're the pilot flying. You're supposed to ask the pilot monitoring, please change speed to this. Please change altitude to this. Please change this to this.
Now, are the controls duplicated on both sides?
Yeah, they are. In a jet, crew resource management, or CRM, dictates that when the autopilot's off and you have a pilot on the controls, the other pilot has to do all the other cockpit functions and also take care of the communications on the radio. When you get that autopilot on and your hands are off the controls, now the pilot flying, who, even though he's not physically flying the airplane, he is now controlling the autopilot, while now the pilot monitoring, the co-pilot, co-captain, can now focus more on talking on the radio. So it really helps to get the autopilot on sooner than later. When I'm flying in congested airspace, flying out of New York, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Dallas, and there's airplanes all over the place, and there's tons of air traffic communications, I'll get the autopilot on right away. And that's not because I'll be overwhelmed. It's because I don't want my co-pilot to be overwhelmed. But then in other places, I'll hand fly the airplane up to 18,000 feet and actually enjoy flying for a second. And then usually once we get into the flight levels, which is above 18,000 feet, I'll get the autopilot on because it's actually now required by law. When you're flying in reduced vertical separation airspace, it's called RVSM. That's where airplanes are separated by 1,000 feet, flying in opposite directions. And of course, when you have airplanes that are separated by 1,000 feet, closing in on each other at 500 miles per hour each one, so you have 1,000-mile-an-hour rate of closure, you want the autopilot flying, because you cannot introduce human error into tolerances that are that tight.
Autopilot was invented, I looked it up on Google, around 1914. Mm-hmm. What did pilots do before that era? They would obviously had to have control the entire time, correct?
They were fully engaged. They were wiggling the sticks, feet on pedals, hands on throttles. They were fully engaged to the aircraft. Who knows? Maybe they had rope that they would tie around the stick or something so they could have, because also that was probably during open cockpit days, so they were wearing wool suits to keep them warm, and so they probably at some point needed to be able to open a thermos or something and drink something warm.
Well,
so
they also weren't flying at 40,000 feet or whatever.
True, that's true.
What is the highest? Do you know the highest a commercial plane can travel?
Most jet airliners are actually limited to 40,000 feet, and some jet airliners can go as high as 45,000. I know the Boeing 747, probably the Airbus A380, they have a service ceiling of, I believe, 45,000 feet, because they need to attain those altitudes to get the fuel burns lower on the engines so they can actually make it across the ocean. Because in pretty much any airplane, whether it's a piston propeller airplane,
Sorry, hold on one second.
Holding for helicopter, holding for an A-Star 350 with a pilot weighs 175 pounds. Blue eyes, definitely blue eyes. So they have to get up to 45,000 feet to be able to get their fuel burns low enough to actually make it across the ocean nonstop. You really want them to make it nonstop.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
But most of the domestic airliners, the Airbus A320s, the Boeing 737s, a lot of those airplanes are limited to 40,000 feet.
Now, is the main reason that these aircraft fly at the height they do for fuel consumption? Because I always wonder, why aren't planes flying at 5,000 feet and just cruising across the earth?
Well, 5,000 feet wouldn't be very comfortable. Believably, the view is great at 5,000 feet. You can see everything going by really fast. But that's where most of our weather occurs, between the surface and around 23,000 to about maybe 40,000 feet. And that's called the troposphere. Now, when you're below about 23,000 feet, that's where you get all the cloud development, and you get the cumulus clouds and different cloud types, and you get different kinds of air mixing, and that creates turbulence.
So great for hang gliding, bad for jet air.
Passenger comfort and not getting vomit all over the walls. So when in the early days of air transportation, during the days of the DC-3 and the DC-6, these big radial engine passenger carriers,
the ones where the flames shot out of the engines?
Where the flames shot out the tailpipes, exactly. They flew around in the lower atmosphere. They were flying around probably no higher than 12,000 feet. And they were susceptible to all the bumps and turbulence that occur in the lower atmosphere. That doesn't mean that, there's no turbulence when you're flying in a jet. There's other kinds out there, but there's a far less turbulence when you're flying in a jet than there would be if you were flying at 5,000 feet.
So you guys fly in the stratosphere then?
Yeah, so the troposphere ends at the tropopause. Now, if you ever have looked at a thunderstorm and you see the thunderstorm doing its big vertical development, that big cumulonimbus cloud, and then at the very top of it, it creates the anvil. And the thunderstorm kind of flattens out at the top when you're looking at it from way, way, way far away. From 100 miles away, you could see the whole shape of it. And you see that big, it kind of flattens out and gets smoother at the top. And there might be an anvil cloud. It's a cloud that just kind of goes off on its own way up high. Well, that is the tropopause. And that is the end of the troposphere. When you see a thunderstorm sort of mushroom up and then sort of splay out at the top, that's the tropopause, and that is the top of where weather occurs. So much so that a thunderstorm can't even get any higher than it.
Yeah, because I've been above a thunderstorm, and you can watch the lightning from above looking down.
Exactly.
It's fascinating to see it ripple across the clouds,
and that's when you know you're flying in the stratosphere.
And so that's the sweet spot for planes.
That is the sweet spot.
Can a plane actually fly if one engine fails?
Yes, it can actually fly if both engines fail. If all the engines fail, an airplane becomes a glider. So it's flying, and it's just using gravity as propulsion instead of jet fuel.
Now, I met a guy who was a pilot, and he said that he became a glider pilot first. Mm-hmm. And he said he encourages all pilots to become glider pilots before they become powered pilots, because learning how to fly a glider is learning how to fly a plane without power.
I am also a glider pilot. I am a commercial glider pilot. I have my glider instructor license. I've also tow gliders, and I'm a tow plane pilot as well. And there's a joke that glider pilots say, glider pilots tell, and it says that it's a joke in reference to airplanes that have engines, and they say an engine takes you to the scene of the accident. So a glider, which has no engine, they really don't have too many accidents. They are very safe. You wouldn't think it. You wouldn't think, oh, this thing that flies through the air without a motor is safer than an airplane, and it really is. And it's quite the feeling when you're in a glider. And if anyone out there who ever has an opportunity to take a glider ride, go take a glider ride. It's incredible when you get up there and the only noise you hear is just the sound of the air.
I actually had an experience like this because I went hang gliding.
Right.
They took us up to the Angeles Crest in the mountains here above LA. And it was hilarious because I had this wonderful guy that I went tandem with who was a seasoned pilot. And he said, okay, so we're going to go off this ramp here. And how it goes is a walk, jog, run. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, the ramp go off the mountain. And when we, if we get to run and we're not airborne, we fall off the mountain. So, but trust me, by the time we get to run, we'll be airborne. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? But sure enough, and I have video of this, you're strapped into the thing and you start walking. And before we got like 5 steps into jog and we just lifted off the mountain. It was incredible. But you're up there and you're flying around and you feel like a bird. And there's no noise but the wind, like you said. Yeah. And he's taking us all around the air currents, and I'm chatting with him. And other people only got like an 8-minute ride. He kept me up there for 30 minutes.
That's great.
Yeah.
And being kept up there in something that's heavier than air, that's made out of metal and fabric, that would be your hang glider. And you're being kept aloft by air currents that are moving up the side of a mountain, or the air currents that are feeding a cumulus cloud. It's incredible what you can do.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It gives you a really good understanding of the fluid dynamics of air. We don't think of air as a fluid, but it is a fluid just as much as water is a fluid. It's just way less dense. You asked earlier about what I feel when I'm flying in an airplane. And other than just I love it, I love the mechanics of flying an airplane. That when I move the controls like this, the airplane does something. But there's times where, up at cruise, flying up at 45,000 feet, I'll just look out the cockpit window, and I can see the wing. And I'll look at the wing and I'll just stare at it in awe. And I still do this. I'm a 10,000-hour pilot. I've been flying for 29 years. And I will still just look at the wing and just shake my head in disbelief. And I'll just think to myself, it's doing nothing, but it's doing everything. And it still gets me.
That's beautiful. Hashtag science.
Hashtag aerodynamics.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I knew somebody once who said that they didn't like science. And I looked at them and I was like, do you understand that science is the reason you're actually alive today?
Yeah.
So I went on to explain that the things in the room right there and all the things in their life, oxygen, gravity, everything, I explained how it's all, science.
Right.
And it was a great conversation because in the end they were like, oh, science is pretty cool.
It's like, do you like your cell phone?
Yeah.
Do you like social media?
Yeah.
We would not have iPhones or cars or anything without
or filtered water.
Or drinking water.
So speaking of science, how fast do most commercial planes fly?
Okay, well, first I'm going to give it to you in terms of Mach. So the speed of sound is Mach 1. The private jets that I fly, we cruise around at about Mach 8.3, Mach 8.5. That is 83%.
644 miles per hour.
Yeah. So Mach 8.3 is 83% the speed of sound. Now, a commercial jet airliner, they're flying around at maybe Mach 7.5. So they're flying at 75% the speed of sound.
575 miles an hour.
God, you're good with math.
Thank you. Thank you. It's Google.
Science.
Yes, science. There we go. Oh, that's hilarious.
So yeah, and they could fly a little faster, but they will chew up their profits by throttling up.
Because of fuel consumption?
Yep.
So is there a certain amount of fuel they're supposed to land with? Like when I scuba dive, there's a certain amount of air you're supposed to have in your tank when you get to surface if possible.
Right. Yeah. Well, because we don't want every airplane to come in as a glider. The minimum for, let's say, flying around VFR, the minimum in the helicopter, VFR is visual flight rules. That's what little airplanes that you see flying over your head at 1,000, 5,000 feet above you, they have to land with a minimum of 30 minutes of fuel, which is not a lot. I personally would never do that. I have my own personal minimum, which is higher than the federal minimum.
That's cool.
So I would never want to land with less than an hour. Now, if you're flying IFR, that's instrument flight rules. That's when you're flying around in the clouds. All airline flights operate under instrument flight rules, under IFR. And the minimum is 45 minutes. But I believe, and I know the company I work at, we have a minimum of an hour of fuel, and that's still not a lot. I land with about an hour and a half to 2 hours of fuel because I want to have options.
Yeah.
Fuel is time, and time is options.
Random weird questions for you. Why are the lights dim for takeoff?
The lights.
What in the cabin?
I don't know, because I think that changes. Every 5 years, an airline comes up with a new policy. I remember one airline, I don't know who it was, but they made sure the lights in the cabin were all on full bright, and you had to make sure your window shades were up at night. And that was because the airplane was going to be putting out more light and would be more visible. If you have all the lights on full bright in the cabin and all the window shades open, that is a pretty well-lit airplane to be seen by other aircraft.
Do pilots sleep during the flight?
Technically, no.
Okay. I mean, are you guys allowed to take a nap for 15, 20 minutes and knock off or no?
Yeah, it's if a passenger ever asks me, "Now, how do you stay awake for the whole 10 hours?" And I say, "I stay awake the whole 10 hours." But what we do is if fatigue starts to take over during cruise is the least risky part of the flight, and also your alertness is down, so fatigue can really take over, especially if you're flying on the back side of the clock. So when you feel fatigue set in, you talk to your partner. There's always another pilot up there, and you ask them, "Hey, are you alert right now? Are you awake?" Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm good. I had a cup of coffee, and I'm just, I'm wide awake. And I would say, well, I am, I'm fading. So I'm gonna knock off for about 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll do that. I'll take a little cat nap. We like to call them NASA naps, because NASA actually conducted a study, and they found that a pilot that was fatigued basically had the same motor responses as an impaired person.
Oh, wow.
So if you're fatigued, and if you could have the opportunity to reset the brain cells, get a little alpha wave going. Is it alpha wave when you're sleeping, or beta? I don't remember. But if you can get a little bit of sleep, actually, if you can hit REM, that's really good. Just for a moment, if you can hit REM, then you would be a lot more vigilant and alert during the riskier phase of flight, which is approach and landing.
So is it harder to take off or land a plane?
I think it's harder to land, but for me, that's the most fun. I mean, for me, at 10,000 hours, even for someone that has 200 hours of flight time, it doesn't take long for it to really become second nature.
Is it ever scary when you're approaching the ground and you see it coming up at you, and you got to land this bird? And is there ever a party that's like, hope I don't screw this up?
Definitely. You definitely know that all your chips are on the table when you're getting closer to the ground, and your flaps are down, and the airplane's in this configuration where if you suddenly had to go around, add power, and suddenly change the flight path from going towards the ground to going away from the ground, you need to do a lot of things. It's best if you do them in the proper order.
Have you ever had to bail on a landing for any reason?
Yeah, I've had to bail on a couple. I've had one where an airplane taxied out onto the runway, and the tower told me to go around immediately. And so it's just throttles all the way forward to the stop. And then you got to get the nose up. You got to change the flight path of the airplane. But your approach speed is slow enough that you can't pull up too hard, or you'll stall the airplane. And with a jet that has big jet engines, when you slam those throttles forward, there's a little bit of a delay from when you move those throttles until you get full thrust coming out of those engines.
Can a plane actually land automatically if a pilot is incapacitated?
That is such a cool question that you just asked that. Yeah. So Garmin, they make a lot of avionics now, cockpits. They make cockpits for airplanes as well. And they were just testing this out in a Piper Malibu or a Piper Mirage that has this new system, and it is an emergency auto land system. Now, right now, the only airplanes that have auto land are airliners, and you have to have an auto land system if you're going to land in thick fog. And only airliners are approved to do this. And it's called a Category 3C approach. That's where you can't see your hand in front of your face. The fog is so thick. And if you have an airplane that's approved for Category 3C approaches, and the airport has all this hardware installed around the runways, and the airplane has an autopilot capable of auto land, can you land an airplane? So basically what I'm saying is it takes a lot of hardware. It takes recurrent training from the pilots every 3 to 6 months in order to do this. But now Piper and Garmin have this test bed. It's a flying test bed, and there's a video on YouTube. And it's the system where, should the pilot become incapacitated, a passenger on the airplane, and we're talking about a single-engine propeller-driven airplane with 6 seats, a passenger can reach up and hit the red emergency land button. And the autopilot, if it's not already on, will automatically engage. The GPS system, using also weather information that's coming in from satellite and from ground stations, will select an airport with a suitable runway. Can be any airport. It doesn't have to be an airport with an auto land system. Any airport with a suitable runway that has good weather and good winds, and within the range of the airplane, is taking all these parameters, will then find the best path to that airport, will actually turn and navigate to that airport. When it reaches the airport, it'll fly a pattern, it'll lower the landing gear, it will come in and land the airplane. It'll do all the throttle changes and everything. It will automatically land. It'll do everything. And during this system, when this system is engaged, there's actually an audible voice that's saying, the airplane is in auto land mode. Do not touch the controls. And it keeps repeating that to the passengers. The airplane will also, the avionics will also automatically send out the emergency transponder code. So air traffic control will automatically know. And I believe in the video, I think it actually said that the system will transmit on the comm frequency, so that air traffic control will know that there's an airplane coming in on an auto land, on an emergency auto land. It's incredible. This is...
Now, will it provide pretzels and peanuts for the rest of the crew and passengers? No, man, that's awesome. I am all for that kind of technological advancement.
It's brand new technology, so that's so cool that you asked that.
Well, speaking of technological advancement, I want to talk about the environment for a minute. I know a lot of people are concerned about the effect that planes have on the atmosphere. I personally think cars are a bigger problem that needs to be addressed as well. But let's say that in the future they design an aircraft that maybe runs on electricity or some form of recyclable power, regenerative power. Won't that lighten the load at the plane so much because there's no longer fuel inside of it that they're going to have to change the way the entire aircraft is actually flown?
It's probably going to change the way the whole entire airplane is designed and built. We might see airplanes in the future that has the wing at the very back of the airplane, not in the middle. And instead of a tail, like we're used to seeing with the vertical stabilizer and the horizontal stabilizer at the back, there would be maybe a single smaller wing at the nose of the airplane. Now, this technology already exists, and that smaller wing on the nose is called a canard.
Canard. That's a fun word to say. I can't wait to actually see what we come up with in the future. I hope I get to live long enough to see this kind of stuff, you know. But before I forget, I've been meaning to ask you, how long is the maximum amount of time that a pilot can actually fly for in your part of the business?
It's 10 hours of flight time. So there's a lot of layers to it, but the basic nuts and bolts of it is 10 hours of flight time limited to a total of a 14-hour duty day. That doesn't mean you're flying those 14 hours, but you are working basically.
Wait, so when you have a flight that, let's say I'm going to fly from LA to Africa and it's a 22-hour flight you stop in Greece and then you go from Greece to South Africa or whatever, are you changing pilots?
That's the layering. Yeah. So let's say if we're flying from LA to Africa, if the flight time is going to be more than 10 hours, you actually need a third pilot. And then if the flight time is going to be more than 12 hours, you need a fourth pilot. Or if you're going to need a fourth pilot, because that fourth pilot gets you up to 16 hours of flight time. So, which can get you pretty far. 16 hours will get you halfway around the world in most jets. But if you're going to do 4 pilots on an airplane, then you might as well not do that. Instead, do 2 pilots and flying the trip, and another 2 that went out 2 days in advance, landed airlined out. They stay at a hotel, they get rest after their airline travel, and then you make a fuel stop, you swap pilots, and now you've got a completely fresh crew to finish the trip. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways to work out those long flights, but yeah.
What's the longest flight you've ever been on yourself?
A good 13 and a half hours, and I've done 13 and a half hours in a G5. What's interesting is I also used to own an aircraft ferrying company. I used to deliver small airplanes all over the world. Now I'm talking about little Cessnas and Pipers and Beechcraft, and these are not airplanes that are designed normally to fly 2,500 miles over an ocean. So what my company did is we would remove the seats from the airplane. We put in these metal fuel tanks called ferry tanks, and we'd plumb those ferry tanks to the wings or to the engines, and we would make that airplane fly 2,500 miles. We would force it to fly the distance.
But you're basically talking now a giant flying bomb with all that fuel in there.
That's what we would do. We were flying these airplanes that were just fuel tanks, just a big flying bomb.
Okay, first of all, that's fucking crazy. Secondly, what's an example of one of those flights you would have done?
Let's say I'm going to fly a small airplane to a new owner over in Australia. Well, I can't just go nonstop to Australia because we can never fill that plane with enough fuel to do that. So we would first fly from California to Hawaii. It's 2,050 miles from California to Hawaii. So doing about 130 to 150 miles an hour, that's going to take you anywhere between 12 and a half to 14 or 15 hours. And I've done that.
There's nowhere to land.
By yourself, surrounded by fuel, and you're just sitting in a spot where you cannot stand up, you cannot stretch out for 15 hours. Basically, imagine Charles Lindbergh. That's what I did for a good 5 years.
That's crazy.
And then the next leg from Hawaii to American Samoa to Pongo Pongo is 2,300 nautical miles. It's even further. And I flew a plane where I think that leg took me 15 and a half hours to get from Hawaii to American Samoa. And those are long legs. Like when you reach your destination, you almost can't stand up.
And you can't fit two people in there.
Nope. You're sitting in one seat. The other 3 seats have been removed, and it's just fuel.
Well, I'm going to stick by my original assessment of that's crazy, but that's pretty cool. Random question. I heard that the reason that most pilots don't have a lot of facial hair is because if the mask actually drops, it has to be able to create a perfect seal around their face. Is that true?
That's true. That's why whenever you see a pilot that flies a jet, most commercial airline pilots, if they have any facial hair, it's a mustache. Maybe a mustache with a goatee, but you can't have the mustache connect to any other part of the facial hair on your cheeks or on your jawbone, because the oxygen mask up in the cockpit, these are not the oxygen masks that are back in the cabin with the passengers. These are an oxygen mask that has to create a tight seal around the nose and the mouth of the pilot so that it can force air into the pilot's lungs. And that's called a pressure demand system. And it has to have a tight seal for that to work. So yeah, facial hair, it will not allow a tight seal.
How come sometimes planes circle an airport before they land?
That's probably just maneuvering. If you're talking about an airliner, they're being positioned from the direction they were arriving from to put themselves into a traffic pattern, to then align themselves up with final. If it's visual outside and you're seeing the airport, you're like, oh, there it is. Why aren't we landing? It's just that they're having to put the airplane in position to land.
Do you know the answer to this question? Because I looked it up before you got here. If a baby's born on board a plane, do you know the answer to what country their citizenship will be?
I've heard different arguments to this.
I know the answer. I just wanted to see if you...
What I believe the answer is whatever airspace you're in when that baby was born is the place of birth of the baby.
What I read was that there's 3 options. It's either the country in which the airline is registered, the country over which the child was born, or the country in which the plane landed. And the discretion is actually usually up to the airline. And they said that sometimes, and the airlines have to take laws into account as well, but they also said that some airlines gift the baby with free airfare to any part of the world during their entire life.
What?
Yeah, it's happened before.
No,
because it's so rare that a baby's born in a plane.
Wow. So that's quite a birthday present.
Yeah, right. Happy birthday, dude. You can go wherever you want.
Go wherever you want, whenever you want. Don't waste it.
Have you ever landed on water?
Yeah, I am also a seaplane pilot.
That's amazing. Is it hard or any different than landing on ground?
It's just slightly different movements of the controls, and you pick it up pretty quick. You realize that water has a lot of surface tension. So the moment your floats touch the water, the airplane wants to pitch down a little bit. So that means the moment the floats touch, you just got to pull back ever so slightly on the control yoke. Not too much or the airplane will become airborne again, but not so much, but just enough so that the tips of the floats, the front of the floats, don't dig into the water. But you pick it up really easy. I got my seaplane rating back in 2000, and I think I did it in 3 days. It was fun. I loved it. If every job paid the same, I'd be a seaplane pilot.
That's cool. Have you ever been, has your plane ever been hit by a bird, hail, or been struck by lightning?
I've been fortunate enough to keep all the airplanes I've flown out of hail. Lightning, I have not been struck by lightning. I've seen an airplane that was struck by lightning, and it's not as catastrophic as you think. It creates little microscopic holes in different parts of the airplane, and it does require repair. But if an airplane gets struck by lightning, it doesn't explode. It doesn't fall out of the sky. It actually, half the time, the pilots don't even know that it got struck by lightning. Mm-hmm. It's only when maintenance goes over the airplane after the flight and they go, oh my God, there was a lightning strike. There's a little char mark here and there's exit marks back over here on the tail. So then they have to ground the airplane. And
now, I've heard horror stories about planes getting hit by a bird.
And I've hit birds.
Yikes. What's that like as a pilot?
Well, listen, my first bird strike was a little tiny sparrow or something. and I was flying a twin engine piston propeller flying freight. This was back in 1999. This was my first job out of college. And I had just taken off from Buffalo, New York, and I was flying to Bedford, Massachusetts, which is just outside of Boston. And I remember I took off and I had all this fresh airflow, from the air vents that come out of like a little scoop on the nose of the airplane. I was in a Piper Aerostar, I think. And I remember I took off and I saw this little bird coming at me. I'm like, oh no. And all of a sudden my airflow stopped. And I went, what the heck just happened? I didn't hear anything. Nothing happened. I thought I actually had missed the bird, but suddenly my airflow stopped. So a couple hours later when I land, a little warm because I didn't have any airflow, I looked at my air scoop and that bird had gone right into this little tube. It was a tube maybe an inch in diameter. And of course it killed the bird, but that bird hit my plane, but it hit it in the exact spot where my air intake was for my fresh air vents, and it plugged at my air vents.
So did you have to land in that case or no?
Well, no, I didn't even know I'd actually hit the bird. So I flew for 2 hours and I landed and did a little walk around. I saw these little tail feathers sticking out of my,
poor thing.
I felt bad. And then I hit a bird a couple months ago, taking off out of New Jersey, out of the New York City area. And it was kind of funny. It was at night. So didn't even know it was out there. And I had just lifted off and I asked for gear up, and the co-captain raised the gear handle and we can hear the gear coming up, and the gear always gives like a little thud because the cockpit sits right above the nose wheel well. So when that nose wheel makes contact with the uplocks, there's a thud. And so what happened was gear comes up and we hear the thud, and then we heard another smaller thud. And my co-pilot and I, we looked at each other. We went, what was that? I don't know. I've never heard the nose wheel do that before. Well, it wasn't until 5.5 hours later, after we flew all the way across the country and landed back in Los Angeles, was Jason, the other captain, was doing a walk around of the airplane, and he goes, "Hey, Robin, come here, you got to see this." And I go out, and on the nose of the airplane, just ahead of where the nose wheel well was this big bloody smear. Aww. And apparently, and we didn't know we had hit a bird, and we flew all the way across the country, and it didn't dent anything, and it didn't do any damage other than. But
you hear stories about birds downing aircraft. That they can take a plane down. Is that
a flock of geese taking down U.S. Airways? I can't remember the flight number, but Sully's airplane. If you get big enough birds going into an engine, that'll definitely do some damage. And if a big bird hits the leading edge of a wing, it could dent the wing, but it wouldn't bring the airplane down. It was only when that weird fluke, that freak occurrence happens where a flock of geese flies through both engines of a twin engine jetliner, does it really make the news.
That's some crazy bad luck right there.
That was crazy bad luck, but also a miracle. I mean, we were talking about gliders earlier. Sully was a glider pilot, and he knew how to glide that airplane to a safe landing spot, even though it was a river. Let's
circle back, no pun intended, to travel. What is the most fun or interesting place you have traveled in your life so far?
Well, those are two separate categories. Most fun, most interesting. I delivered an airplane to Morocco with my friend Ryan. He was my business partner at Windward Aviation, which was my aircraft delivery company. And after delivering the airplane to Morocco, we were shown around a little bit by the client, and then we jumped on a train and we rode the train up to northern Morocco. And it was just one of those trains where you can hang out the side of the train, and it was fun having a travel buddy. It was fun that we flew ourselves in a small single-engine Cessna across the Atlantic to get to Morocco in the first place. Most interesting, I have to say, is Iceland. Being a photographer and an eco-adventurer, I just find Iceland to be a beautiful country with full of geological surprises.
Well, speaking of eco-travel, what do you think about technological advancements for aircraft in relation to the environment and the concern of jet fuels? And from a pilot's perspective,
it's not moving fast enough. Automobiles are having more technological advances than aircraft. Jet engines are still based on technology that was developed back in the 40s and 50s, I want to say. Yes, it's getting more efficient, but aviation has had 70 to 80 years of jet technology, but yet the technology hasn't really improved greatly. We've had almost a century of the same technology. And only now, approaching 2020, are we starting to see electric airplanes and maybe some hydrogen airplanes. But these are, hydrogen fuel cell airplanes and different experimental fuels. But it's taken a climate crisis to get us to that point. And these airplanes are only prototypes. They're not in production.
In your own personal opinion, how long do you think it's going to be until commercial air travel has changed technologically to a way that doesn't hurt the environment?
I don't think the time where commercial air travel doesn't have an impact on the environment at all is ever really going to be seen in our lifetime. I mean, if we're talking fossil fuels, maybe near the end of our lifetime, we might see that. Or
you and I, our lifetime.
You and I, yeah. We're in our 40s. So I think it might take 20 more years for us to see the regular usage of electric airplanes, solar airplanes, whatever sort of electrical storage technologies exist 10 or 20 years from now. Right now it's lithium ion. Who knows what it's going to be down the road.
Right.
But because safety is paramount and the FAA creates laws to keep us safe, but those same laws and those same bureaucracies also impede advancement in technology, and they slow it down. And there's a lot of organizations out there like the National Business Aviation Association, NBAA, and also AOPA, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, and the Experimental Aircraft Association, EAA. There's all these different organizations out there that are they're lobbying to try to get these laws relaxed just a little bit so that we can advance the technology faster and get more environmentally conscious technology out there. But it's going to be slow. And it's sad. I wish that wasn't the case. But on that note, I think you mentioned about the environment and flying jets. Air travel still has a lower impact on fossil fuel emissions than shipping or automobiles. Yeah. Because if a lot of people just think, oh, the automobile, cars, trucks, motorcycles, they burn gas. Okay, well, what about the tar and the asphalt that has to be produced and the vehicles used to create roads? A road has a massive carbon footprint, and it doesn't really allow for mass transit. It allows for 1 to 4 people to travel in a vehicle that's also running on rubber tires and running on gasoline, that takes up maybe 30 square feet, between the space of the vehicle itself and also the safety space around it, because you can't have vehicles connected to each other like a train. And you look at roads, and they're actually a very inefficient way to move people and metal being the cars.
I say this every podcast just about, we need to invent the transporter.
Yes, we do. We really do.
If we had that technology, that's where I think, and I'm not joking, we should be working on matter transference, because if we could, all the goods that are shipped by shipping containers overseas to here and back and forth, it would all just be instantly transported. Yeah. People, you could step onto a pad and be in London in 2 seconds.
It'd be incredible.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the politics that would go into that?
Yeah,
all the lobbies and the politicians who are connected to oil money, road money, shipping money, airplane money, all the industries out there that would instantly collapse. I think that if that technology was invented right now, that technology, God, we might not even see the use of that technology to move us on a day-to-day basis, probably for our lives, because there is so much money involved in ending all the other modes of transportation. And that's,
well, I mean, it could cause I wouldn't want to say an economic collapse, but it would cause such a massive shift in our economy. But I would welcome it, honestly, because then think about all the businesses that would rise up creating transporter pads in every city, the jobs that would be created. So
that's true.
I'm all about, hey, if a new technology comes around that is great for human beings, then the people who are going to lose their jobs, I feel where the government should spend money is then in re-educating those people, giving them the chance to say, hey, we don't need coal anymore. So all you coal miners out there who've been working hard for us for all these years, those of you who still want to work, some of you can be given a certain amount of money that your job's been taken away. Okay, you can retire at, whatever amount of money if you're a certain age. If you want to keep working or you need to keep working, then we offer you free education at one of these universities around the country or the closest one to you, whatever. And you get to, pick one of these other 20 careers that we now need people for. So maybe you go from a coal miner to a person that's helping build transporter pads.
That's true. Yeah.
And I try to say these things and people go, oh, it's not that simple. And I'm like, I'm not saying it's simple, but it is possible, so it's about it's about recycling. It's recycling people, not the way that sounds, but it's recycling one job to another one, repositioning people to better ourselves.
Imagine how great it would be to be able to say, hey, let's go see some geysers in Iceland around, let me say, after breakfast, and then do lunch over in, I don't know, want to go to Rome for lunch, and let's just wrap it up with a nice
walk
dinner
through
cruise.
a Japanese garden in Tokyo.
Japanese garden over, exactly. How amazing would that be? Boy, imagine.
Now, I'm all about people charging. Like right now, let's say it costs, like a recent plane ticket I purchased for an international trip was $500 per ticket, right?
Yeah.
For round trip. So if someone said to me, hey, if you want to be transported to London from LA, that's $99 round trip. Okay, cool. That's fine. I will gladly pay $100 to be transported instantly and not to be in a plane for 13 hours.
If I had to go all the way, halfway around the world, here to Australia, and could do it in half a second, I'd pay $5,000 to do that and not have to sit on an airplane for 14 hours.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it should be. Yeah, we have such a great thing here. We should have some third-party company that you have to have some kind of checks and balances system, so someone doesn't come around and go, no, man, it's $20,000 to go to Australia. We're the only company that transports,
Or what about when it reaches when it really reaches saturation and there's all these different transport companies, just like there's a lot of different airlines, and you're moving so many people around, you're going to have to have security. You're probably going to, you can't probably, I don't know, can you wear your clothes when you get transported?
I would think so.
You have to go naked.
I think you and your suitcase, all your goods, everything gets transported. I am also looking forward at the horrible terrorist, transporting a bomb into the middle of a place, and then of course there's the transporter screw ups where like someone ends up as a pile of jello.
This isn't my nose. you like crossed paths with the beams of some other person, and he got your nose and one of your arms, or
this is like The Fly. So if you were going to recommend one place in the world that you think everybody should try and visit in their lifetime, what would it be?
Boy, I think it really depends on what that person's tastes are. I love Iceland. If you're someone who's never traveled before and you're looking for a place where you feel safe, Iceland is that place. In the summertime, there could be a lot of people, a lot of tourists, but if you go in the early spring or late fall, you might not have a whole lot of light, but there also won't be as many tourists. And
I love traveling in the off season. It's one of my favorite things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just nothing worse than just, busloads and busloads upon busloads of tourists. Japan is also a really beautiful place to visit. They have beautiful architecture and beautiful gardens and a beautiful country.
Great food.
Wonderful food. And Japan would be a tough one to beat.
Is there somewhere that you haven't been yet that you want to go?
Antarctica.
Why is that?
I've been on every continent except Antarctica. I want to go to Antarctica also because it's not a place where a whole lot of people have gone.
Mostly untouched landscapes.
Yeah.
Are there any travel tips that you would want to impart on people from all your years of traveling around the world? Just basic things that you think everybody should know.
I guess there's two things that pop to mind, recommendations for new and even seasoned travelers. Number one, travel light. Second tip is with regards to safety, just follow your instincts. And yeah, don't travel
Common sense,
at
safety.
2:00 in the morning in a big urban center.
Yeah, totally. I mean, just basically common sense, right? So let's talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is food. What's your favorite food, Robin?
Ramen.
Really?
I really love ramen. I don't know why. and it's funny. Like up in Iceland, I remember I sought out a couple ramen places, but also it was cold, so I really wanted the hot soup.
What advice would you give to people that are afraid to fly?
There's nothing to be afraid of. There's the saying that you're more likely to get into an accident on the drive to the airport than in the airplane. And we were talking about technology earlier, the technology of engines and fuselages and windows and everything is getting better every year. And safety keeps going up and accidents keep going down. And there is no safer way to travel than by air.
Until we get the transporter.
Do
you think that traveling makes you a better human being?
It absolutely does. It's an education that you can't get anywhere.
Yeah, there's
other
no
than just by
school for
doing
this.
it.
Yeah.
Right. You learn how to be self-sufficient and how to think on your feet in good ways and how to utilize resources around you. Resources on how to get around somewhere without owning a car, resources on how to gather information about places to go see, and
learning how to drive on another side of the road.
That's definitely a fun one. I love driving on the other side of the road.
Me too. Now, I know you're away from your wife quite a bit because you travel so much and you're flying around, Are you guys able to find the time to reconnect and have time together? Can she fly with you sometimes? Like, how do you guys work out the you being around the world thing?
It's been tough. I'll be honest. It's not been easy. My current job is great. My boss is very generous around the holidays, and he will actually allow us to buy an airline ticket for her on the company card so she can come join me.
So you guys are able to find ways to be able to spend time together. And
yeah, I mean, with Skype and not FaceTime and video chats, that helps. What's hard though is my wife also loves to travel, but I travel for a living. So then when I get home, she's just itching to go on a trip. And I'm like, oh God, I just want to be home right now just for like a day, but I really want to please her. So
good man.
Yes. So there's times that I just live out of my suitcase for 3 weeks.
The last thing I like to do with all of my podcast interviewees is to play a little game I call 299 Philosophical and Life Questions with Moonbird. I have a list of 299 philosophical and life questions I've collected from friends, family, and the internet. Mm-hmm. You get to pick 2 numbers randomly here. I'll ask you those 2 questions, and hopefully you'll want to answer them.
Okay.
What are your 2 numbers?
Let's go with 172.
Okay, and
71.
172. Okay. How would you rate your looks on a scale of 1 to 10?
Okay, well... I am not a vain person, so I am going to say a 5, but I know that I'm probably knocking myself down a couple numbers because I don't know. I'm one of those people that can't talk. I don't know why. I can't talk highly of myself. I can't be like, well, I'm a 9.
Since the listeners can't see you, I'm going to tell them that Robin is actually in excellent shape and is a very handsome, chiseled-looking man who probably most people in the world would look at and say he's a solid 8.5.
I'll take 8.5. That's pretty good.
And I'm sure Karen would say a 10.
Yeah, no, she'd say 9. Or she would actually just agree with you. She'd go, no, actually, because she's Irish, she would make a joke out of it. She's like, what are you talking about? 2? Oh my God, 2 all the way. I just married him because he's a pilot.
Number 71. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Nice. That's a good one.
It's pronounced Nice.
It's pronounced. That's what I meant. Nice. If I could live anywhere in the world, I don't know if my place, my wife has the same, she has the same wants. I don't know if this place has a name, but it's surrounded by mountains. It's on a big lake, not like a massive, huge lake, but a lake big enough to accommodate a seaplane. But also, 20 minutes to town, by a drive to town. We don't want to be country bumpkins, but we also we just want to be surrounded by trees and mountains and fresh air. and water.
Do you want 4 full seasons?
Yeah, we love seasons. Yeah, we absolutely would love the seasons. I love to downhill ski.
I'm going to recommend Minnesota or Canada or New Zealand.
Yeah, well, Canada would be
England.
great. Yeah, New Zealand, that would be wonderful. Yeah, that's I don't think, here's your answer. I haven't been to enough places yet. In all the traveling that I've done, I still haven't been to enough places to pick a place.
That's a great answer.
I also have another great answer for you. For question number 172 on a scale of 1 to 10. If you really think about it, humans, we just kind of look at someone and gotta hope I'm not like opening up a can of worms here. Just human nature, not me personally, but human nature. We probably look at people and say, I would or I wouldn't.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Men and women both be like, oh, I do that. So whatever. But so that means we're probably binary. We're just ones and zeros. so when you say on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like, well, would you or wouldn't you? Am I a 1 or am I a 0?
And we will let the world decide. And that brings us to the end of our original episode. As I mentioned, Robin was kind enough to chat with me again just a few days ago. Robin, welcome back. I'm glad you're here at 285 feet above sea level today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. A little lightheaded from the altitude of 285 feet.
Hey, I don't know if I mentioned it in the original episode. I don't think I did, but you are actually a fellow Moonbird.
I guess I am. My logbook has a pretty cool feature where it can show a map of all the places I've flown to in my career, and it is a spider web across the entire planet. It's very cool. I'll have to show it to you.
If you can share that photograph, I would love to post it with the podcast and show people how cool it looks.
Absolutely.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about in the original podcast that I realized I actually forgot, which is a wonderful thing that we get to do this again, is you were an international air ambulance captain, and I'd love for you to tell people what that was like.
I think that was one of the times in my life where I really had a sense of purpose, rather than flying rich people or famous people, flying people that really needed to go somewhere was I think one of the highlights of my career.
And how does it work? Is it like, are you called to an emergency scene or something like that? And what are you flying?
It's not so much like a helicopter pilot gets called to an emergency scene. I was flying Learjets, and the Learjet was a wonderful platform to get patients from maybe an area where they had an accident and were transferred from the hospital to the airport, and then we'd be there to load them into the airplane with a couple of flight nurses, and the flight nurses would take care of the passenger, keep them stable during the flight, and then we would get the passenger to a city that has a better facility for their care. And air ambulance was really my introduction to international travel and international flying. Prior to that, I was only flying domestically. And I just remember the thrill that I felt when I was flying an American who had been hit by a bus out of Ecuador, and to bring them back home to the United States so that they could get the treatment that they really needed. And also flying a former general who had had a heart attack in the Philippines, and his insurance company, part of his insurance policy was expedited travel out of wherever he is in order to get the help he needs. So we had to pick him up in this mountainous airstrip in Baguio, Philippines. I think the elevation was 4,000 feet and the runway was 4,500 feet long. A car actually had to drive down the runway to scare all the cattle off the runway before we could
This is like
land.
out of Romancing the Stone.
It was really cool, and flying that approach in the mountains, like actually flying down a ridge line and then landing on this crazy runway with shanties built along the side of the runway was just something I'll never forget.
Well, Robin, obviously a lot has changed since we first spoke a few months ago,
Right.
and I'm curious, how has the pandemic affected you as a pilot?
Well, I haven't really flown that much. I'm averaging about one flight a month. The guy that I work for there's no need for him to travel. Everything can be done through Zoom or FaceTime. So no, not much flying. In fact, the way it's affected me is I've actually been working at my boss's storage unit. It's this big warehouse full of these wooden crates, these wooden vaults. Basically, it looks like the end of
Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones. It looks just like that. It blew my mind the first time I saw it. And basically, my name came up as a very organized person to help organize all of our boss's, office and personal items that are in all these different wooden vaults.
So when you do fly now, how do you feel about getting back into the air and people traveling again? And what kinds of precautions and stuff do you have to take now as a pilot going forward?
Well, we have to disinfect the airplane every time we fly it. We have to disinfect the cabin, and we also have to wipe down the cockpit so that the next flight crew doesn't get our germs. So now there's this task of just wiping everything down and keeping everything clean. Also wearing masks while we greet the passengers. The pilots, we take our masks off once we're up in the cockpit because we're in such close proximity to each other. We really don't think a mask is really going to protect us.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to socially distance in a cockpit.
It really
right?
is, yeah. So we just take our masks off. It makes doing our job easier. But when we're greeting the passengers, we'll wear our masks and, not shake their hands and, just maintain social distancing as best we can.
Do you have any concern about having been exposed to COVID anywhere, or do you think you may have been at some point?
I thought maybe I was. I had a lot of pilot training earlier in the year. In fact, just when the pandemic was hitting, I was in Dallas doing Gulfstream G280 recurrent training. And then about 3 weeks later, I was in Long Beach doing my recurrent training for the Gulfstream G5. And I was in a facility that had a lot of other people there, and I'm using simulators that have had thousands of people come through them. And this was, like I said, just before the pandemic was hitting. So things weren't being wiped down and precautions weren't being taken to the extremes that they are now. And I was concerned that maybe I had contracted it because the moment I got home from Dallas, I got sick. And then I actually went and got the antibody test, and I came up negative. I've never been so disappointed to test negative for a disease in my life. I so badly wanted that test to be positive.
Well, it's interesting because at the end of December, we were in Germany, Austria, and the Czech Republic. We came home. We were here for January. Then in February, right before the pandemic hit, we went to Turks and Caicos for a week. Then we came home and we flew up to Portland. Oh, wow. And we came back to LA. So we were traveling all over. And then right after the pandemic hit, we both got sick. So Jolene got sick first, then I got sick. And what's really weird is that we both had fever, and I had a sore throat that wouldn't go away for almost 2 weeks.
Oh, man.
Now, thankfully, we didn't have any of the other breathing problems or things like that, but we never got tested because we just got better. And then right as we were getting better, everything started shutting down, and we were like, oh shit, I wonder if we had that, So at some point we'll probably get the antibody test done and just see,
Yeah.
Well, hey, we're going to take the podcast over to current events now and talk about the stuff that surrounds the killing of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter and all the stuff that's been going on in the world with protests and awareness. I'm curious because you and I are both middle-aged white men, and I have another podcast episode called Voices from Black America that we just recorded as well. That's a bunch of Black people from America and one person from South Africa all offering their voices and their opinions about the situation, which I can't wait for people to hear. But I'm curious, how has this affected you as a fellow middle-aged white man, and has this experience changed your industry?
Well, this has affected me as a middle-aged white man that I no longer recognize the country I live in. And just watching our current leadership divide the country further, and our partisan politics, and also the feeling of helplessness. I'm not saying that there's nothing I can't do. I often wonder if I was one of the people standing there on the sidewalk witnessing this happen, this cop sitting on George Floyd's neck, would I have possessed the bravery to rush that cop and knock him off George's neck? And I want to say, yes, I have the bravery to do that. But then I also know that I would be retaliated against so aggressively by those cops that I probably would have been shot. Anybody would have been shot, especially a black person. If a black person had rushed the cop that was sitting on George's neck, But I think a white person probably would have been shot just as easily in a situation like that, because the cops see that as an aggression towards them. So they will respond the way they're trained, which is with a lot of force. But I do want to believe that if I were to be in a position where I was seeing something like that happen, that I would do something about it, regardless of the ramifications.
I think a lot of people feel like they'll do something about it now.
Oh, yeah.
Going forward.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us feel very empowered that we're not going to let that kind of shit ever happen again if we have the power to stop it.
Right. And that's now. But imagine, though, if you were there and this man's life is being snuffed out by a person in uniform, and you did do something about it, and you were, if you weren't immediately shot and wounded or killed, you are definitely going to be prosecuted.
Imprisoned.
Yeah, you're going to be prosecuted because you assaulted a cop. And here's the thing: you might have saved that person's life, but your life is now ruined. And prior to George Floyd's murder, that would have been the news. A person assaults cop while cop doing job. Yeah, now if someone decides to take the matter into their own hands and save someone's life, I think now the courts and the public's perception they
would see the act of heroism, not
completely shifted. And it would be nice to see that citizens can actually take a role in helping law enforcement do the right thing.
Yeah, and this brings up a lot of philosophical questions for the world, and one of them is, why does it take sometimes acts of tragedy to get us to unite as a species and see clearly what the answers are to things? It's when it comes right down to it, it's pretty irritating that human beings are like that, honestly, that it takes bad things for us to see the good sometimes. It sucks.
And I think I actually mentioned this in our first recording, and it's called blood priority. Nothing is done until there's blood. And the FAA won't write new laws to enhance safety until there's an accident. I think as a species, or maybe it's a cultural thing, I wouldn't say we lack the brain power or the ability, but we certainly as a culture lack the horsepower to take the initiative to prevent something from happening. And it's because no one wants to change anything until something terrible has happened. And it's just the way it is.
No, I understand what you're saying. I do think there are some places where there's a lot of proactive stuff, like with the environment and things like that. People do try to facilitate change. It does fall on deaf ears a lot. A lot of the environmental yeah.
And that takes us back to our partisan politics. If one party will take a stand for the environment, the other party will take the opposite stand. Even if they think they're wrong about it, they just have to take the opposite stand so they can put their people in office. And that's why partisan politics is just not working.
Well, and it's a bouncy ball going back and forth, because now the new leader, let's just say Biden gets elected, he's going to have to spend time now fighting the Republicans in the House and the Senate to undo some of the shit that Trump's done. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, this is what we do. We just go back and forth and forth. And that's why progress is so slow. And I've tried to explain this to people, that change just doesn't happen at the speed that people want it to, unless there is some kind of tragedy, like George Floyd gets murdered, and now all of a sudden we're talking about police reform. Police departments all over the nation are making positive changes. And it's because, honestly, there's now a magnifying glass on all of them. Yeah. And so it's really good that these changes are happening. It's fucking horrific how they went down. I have a friend who's a reporter, who's been a journalist his whole life, and he said to me, make no mistake, the world just witnessed a public lynching live on camera. Yeah. And I said, yeah, that's pretty accurate, Yeah. I'm curious of a couple things, circling back to the race issue. Mm-hmm. Is the pilot world diverse, or is it predominantly white?
Both. So let's start with what it is predominantly white, and it really doesn't have anything to do with racism or anything. It's socioeconomic. That's what it is. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. It's socioeconomic. White people, just because there's more white people that are in the middle class, and they have the money to pursue the flight training. And the reason why there are not as many people of color and minorities in aviation is because they just haven't been given the opportunity. They have to make so many sacrifices early in their life. They have to not go to college or even drop out of high school so they could take care of their parents or their siblings. And it's just such it's that systemic racism that we're all talking about. And it's just that people of color are just never given the opportunities to rise.
So would you, as an instructor, I know you can teach because of all your certifications and whatnot, right? If someone said to you, hey, let's say you have a flight school, we would like you to offer free aviation training to whatever, let's say 10 people a year that are people of color or minorities or women, in addition to all the people that pay, obviously, to, but if they can basically apply to a program, let's say, that we invent where they can prove their socioeconomic status, they show that they don't have the money to do this, and then 10 of those people pass an exam and they get free training. Would that be something you'd be open to doing to help kind of push the world forward?
Well, I'd be open to, let's say if I have a business where I'm providing flight instruction, I wouldn't be able to afford to give free training because airplanes cost money. You got to maintain them. You got to pay flight instructors. So I wouldn't be able to do it for free, but I would, if there was a program, a grant that I could get as a company to go out and recruit and encourage minorities to come learn to fly, and that federal or state or federal grant was able to pay for the fuel and the maintenance and the salaries or the wages for the instructors, absolutely I would do that. But I'd go out of business if I had to do it for free.
It's interesting. So yeah, I've been trying to come up with ideas, and I think that's brilliant, actually. I think because people talk a lot about reparations, and I don't want to go down that hole, but what I do think is, I don't think that we should be handing out just blatant cash to people, but I do think we are absolutely responsible. We enslaved black people for how long? We treated them terribly. We've pushed them down socioeconomically. The least we can fucking do is say, let's give you grants to go get educated. Let's give you the opportunities you haven't been given. And I don't mind that at all. And if that comes out of my taxes a little bit, okay, it's such a minor amount of money we'd be talking about. And so I think that's what we should be doing. We should be inventing more programs and giving them access to. I think that's brilliant. Saying, hey, government, subsidize these programs and give us the means to do this for people. That's brilliant.
Well, let me answer the second part of your question, which was, is it diverse? Well, I already answered that. Most pilots are white, but the airlines absolutely hire diversity. In fact, they hire diversity first. So for me, being a white male, I am actually the last person in line that gets hired after the servicemen and women that are coming out of the military, and also the women and the minorities. Because the airlines really are trying they're really trying to have a very diverse pilot roster. The thing is, there just aren't that many, minority or women pilots out there. So you still see a lot of white male pilots getting hired because we represent most of who are doing the flight training. So I also want to bring up that women pilots, I think that I think the reason why a lot of women don't see aviation when they're girls as a possible job for them is because they're raised by their parents that are teaching them about princesses and unicorns and a girl's role in the home and the family dynamic. And man, do I want that to change. I wish girls were taught right away how cool it is to go camping. They can be anything they want to be, and to be anything you want to be. And let's not put princesses on a pedestal. Let's put astronauts and scientists and pilots and doctors up on pedestals. And I wish parents would stop ramming, not even parents, but parents and Disney. I wish they would stop ramming princesses down every girl's throat out there. I think it's just horrible what it does.
Yeah, where is the Barbie doll that's a scientist?
Right, exactly. That's such a great point. Yeah, where's the pilot Barbie? Where's the Dr. Barbie?
Where's nuclear physicist Barbie?
Right, exactly. And that's why there aren't that many women pilots. And I'll tell you, when you do meet a woman pilot, you're just blown away at how cool they are and professional, and they're great aviators. And you just you don't see that many out there. They are out there, and their numbers are growing. There are organizations such as the 99s that are trying to encourage girls to become pilots, and there are scholarships out there. And I know that there are scholarships that are trying to capture minority groups as well, but there just aren't enough scholarships. There needs to be more programs for women and girls and for minorities.
One of my dreams, no joke, since I was a little boy, one of my dreams has been to be a philanthropist. Like, I wish someone would give me billions of dollars so that I could just sit back and go, cool, I'm going to make the world a better place now, and start creating arts programs and things like you're talking about. I would work with people like you to create these grants and like use investments so that like you set up scholarship programs where they come from an investment, a safe investment that every year generates enough interest to just feed the scholarship fund and it's eternal. There are not enough of those things going on for my tastes. And so any billionaire that's listening to this podcast, if you want to hire me as your philanthropist, I have amazing ideas. Give me a call.
Let's get started on that.
Definitely. The most important question that I think we can ask right now is, how do we keep this conversation alive? How do we keep this dialogue going?
I think America will not let the conversation die in the first place. I think this has finally reached a tipping point where things are finally going to get done. I was listening to NPR this morning, and already the House has pushed forward some legislation about police reform. The Senate's going to come out with their own version, and then, of course, the White House also wants to come out with their own version. But it's happening, and it's unfortunate that it has taken so many murders by the police to make this happen. And also, the conversation is going to continue because George Floyd is not going to be the last. It's going to happen again. Until
we hope not, man. I
really hope not. No, I really, really, really want to be wrong, but history will repeat itself, and so the conversation will happen again, and there'll be more protests. So I don't think this conversation is gonna die anytime soon.
Do you feel a responsibility as a white man to help facilitate that conversation?
I, as a photographer, really want to go shoot protests. I want to try to be that photographer that captures that iconic photograph that says it all. Like in the 60s, the young woman who puts a flower in the barrel of a policeman's rifle. What has stopped me is that I have a responsibility to my family, that I don't lose my job, and I can't afford to lose my salary as a pilot. And I feel weak for saying this, but if I get arrested, I'm done as a pilot. And because the police were arresting everyone and beating everyone up, they were beating up protesters, and they were, shoving their rifle butts into the guts of cameramen who were trying to report the news. I mean, it was just so violent, and I just could not risk being arrested, because I will never work again in aviation.
That's a very honest thing, and there's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. I challenge every white person to answer this question.
Okay.
Knowing how black people are treated in this country, would you trade places with them right now? And the answer is, if
No.
people are honest, no, I wouldn't.
No.
And so right there, that just says it all.
It's got to be a horrible way to grow up and live in America, for most of them to start out with so little and to really not have the opportunities presented to them to climb out of their socioeconomic position and even their cultural position. Not cultural, sorry. Their I guess their position in society, just because of how they are
lack of opportunity, and
they're immediately categorized and labeled, and I cannot imagine what it's like to live like that.
So I know this is a big question. It may be hard to answer, but as someone who has traveled all around the globe, you've seen more of the planet than most people ever will. And with your decades of experience out there, what do you think is the best solution for the entire planet, for the human race, not just in race issues, but just overall as a species to move forward? Are there things that you look at the world and go, I think we should start doing this?
Yes. When I travel to European countries, I see, I was in Switzerland and walking through a city park, and there were beehives, and they are trying to keep bee populations healthy. And they also know that bees are important for pollinating and for our plants. And without bees, we all die. And so I remember seeing that. And I just feel like other developed countries have a greater connection to the importance of a healthy environment, for us as a human species. And I don't really see that in America. I think America is selfish. And I know this is really it's really most of the human race, but I find Americans to be incredibly selfish in general. And I hope people don't retaliate against me for saying that, but I am just always reminded how Americans are always me, my, what can I get?
Well, no, look at all the assholes that are running around going, why should I wear a mask? You're taking away my freedom.
Sure.
It's not about your fucking freedom, you idiot.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's about protecting everyone else around you.
There's just
how do you not see you're just one person in a country of hundreds of millions? Like, what the fuck?
There's this sense of selfishness and entitlement that most Americans have. And I think like what I don't see when I travel are Europeans going, Germany, number one, or UK, we rock. But man, you come to America and we're like, USA, we're number one. You know what? I have a reminder for you Americans. We are ranked 27th in the world under education.
Yep.
And I think the greatest problem with our country is our education. And as long as we keep defunding our education and our schools and keep packing classrooms with more kids, and we keep decreasing the quality of the education that our youth are getting, we're going to continue to have the problems that we have in America. I think if you were to ask me, what would I do if I was president? This is it. If I was president, the first thing that I would do is make education the number one priority in this country. We need to make Americans smarter again.
And I have news, Robin. I mean, I have news for people that they can say what they want, but the reality is that they don't want to face is that the current government we have wants them to be stupid.
Absolutely.
They basically want to enslave Americans to be dumb and do what they say and fall in line. They don't want you, because if you get educated and you get smart, you're going to see through all their bullshit. And they want the control and power.
Yeah. So to generalize, so I'm not really picking on the right or the left. When you have people that do not know how to think for themselves, when they get their news from social media, we need Americans to gather the facts and come to their own conclusions and to not just repeat the sound bites of their news source.
I agree. And that's on both sides.
Yeah. But yeah, we need to educate America.
I agree with you. Education is the number one priority for me, for people going forward. I think it's the answer to 99% of our problems.
And if we can educate and not have leaders that are debunking science, then I think education is everything. If we have an educated species, we can save the environment. We can stop killing each other. I think the world would be a much better place if we were smarter. And then the other thing is, we need more vacation time. If I was president,
I agree.
If I was president, the United States is the only developed nation in the world that doesn't have mandatory vacation time. The only one.
And I'm all for the 4-day work week, brother.
Yeah. Employers in America are not required to give you 1 day of vacation. Not one. The reason why they do is to stay competitive. But if we had mandatory vacation time, that would actually help joblessness here in America. Because now there would be more temp workers filling in for the people who are taking vacation. And also,
you have a happier populace of workers.
America has a terrible mental health problem, and I think that's even with the people who are not diagnosed. It's the people who are stressed at work and are anxious, and I think I'm one of them. I don't get any time off. So it's if I was president, those are the two things that I would do. I would educate, and I would also make vacation mandatory, and I think we would see life in America really improve.
Robin, if you run for president, I will be your vice president.
Sounds great.
Together we will save the planet.
I love it.
Some of the younger people that I talked to have posted some things recently and said that, oh my God, the world's so horrible, it's all falling apart. And they say all these very dramatic things. And I recently put a post on Facebook about perspective. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I am not in any way trying to take away from the seriousness and the tragedy of what's happened in the world recently about the environment, about George Floyd, about any of these issues.
Right.
But But I do want to offer a moment of perspective. And I know I had sent you some of this information, but I'm gonna read this out loud on the podcast because I think it's important. So you and I were born at the end of the Vietnam War and things like Jonestown. And you and I in our lifetime have lived through, and we're both in our 40s, you and I have lived through a world that has seen the Cold War, the hostage crisis, the Troubles, Lebanon, Grenada, Panama, Chernobyl, the Gulf War, Haiti, Bosnia, Kosovo, the Iraq War, September 11th, and the unrest in the Middle East, not to mention disasters and things like typhoons, tidal waves, earthquakes, landslides, tornadoes, hurricanes, terror attacks, wildfires, train wrecks, the Congo, Deepwater Horizon, as you mentioned, suicide bombings, shootings, Oklahoma City, Fukushima, Somalia, droughts, plane crashes, HIV, SARS, MERS, Ebola, swine flu, and of course, police violence and murder. The list goes on and on and on. I am barely touching the surface of it. So the point of saying all that is that when you step back and you look at life on a bigger scale, I really don't believe that things are more dramatic or worse than they've ever been. I really, truly believe that the world is the best it's ever been. Our technological advancements are incredible. If you look at medical care from 1971 when we were born to 2020, the medical care in 71 was barbaric compared to some of the things we've progressed and made happen. So how do we, going forward, show the world about perspective? How do we get people to step back and go, these issues you're on fire about, you should always be on fire about, and we should always work towards progress and inclusivity and all the positive things we all want. But you should also chill out a little bit and relax, because the world is a great place and it progressively gets better and better through time, in my opinion. I think it has progressively throughout history gotten better and better. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yes. I think the problem that we have is people lose the perspective because we have a million different sources, a million different voices. When we were growing up, we had 3 different news sources: ABC News, CBS News, and
NBC News,
and NBC News. And that was it. We had the nightly news and the local news, and 3 channels, and that was it. And now we have hundreds of channels. We have channels that are 24/7 news, and
we have fake websites that are giving us fake information.
We have that. Yeah. We have Twitter. We have Facebook. We have so many different streams coming in on a daily basis. And of course, it's almost all negative. And I think we have quite a challenge ahead of us if we are to maintain some sort of perspective on how good we have it, when the noise that we are bombarded with on a daily basis is telling us all how bad it is. And I have no idea how we could fix that.
I don't know either. I'm trying to talk about it on the podcast to say to people, hey, things are not anywhere near as bad as you think they are. Like, the world is great. If you think you have it tough, I mean, look, I'm not trying to be over dramatic here, but when I was in Germany, I walked through the Dachau concentration camp. And I got to tell you, seeing what happened to those people, my life is a fucking pleasure cruise, honestly.
Yep, absolutely.
No matter, on the worst day of my life, it's still a pleasure cruise compared to what those people endured 80 years ago. You know what I mean?
We have people that, because there isn't oat milk at their coffee shop, and they can't get their lavender oat milk cappuccino, they throw their arms up in disgust and go, FML, fuck my life, God.
You should see my post about lavender-coated boo-boo beans on Facebook. It's pretty funny. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, funny. I don't know the answer. I mean, look, I'll be honest with you. I make no bones about it. Everyone knows I'm opinionated, but I walk around, I look out the world, and I look at probably 60 to 80% of the people talking, and I just think to myself, you got to shut the fuck up.
Yeah. And I wish there was an easy answer on how we can give people that perspective.
Well, yeah, it's like some of these problems people complain about. It's like, your problems aren't problems.
Yeah.
You know? So one of the examples I gave on Facebook is when the pandemic first happened, I'm at Ralph's grocery store and I'm standing in line waiting to go in, and this person in front of me, 6 feet away, is just complaining up a storm while simultaneously looking at their iPhone 11 and searching for stuff. And I didn't, but I really wanted to go, hey, excuse me.
Right.
You
have a computer in the palm of your hand that has more.
Exactly. More power than all of the devices that came in your parents' and grandparents' generation combined together.
Right.
Not to mention, can we talk about the fact that there is a motherfucking camera in your phone. In your fucking phone, you stupid piece of shit.
Your phone actually has 5 cameras in it. You get the 3 on the back and the 2 on the front, on the face of it. It's just, it's incredible.
Yeah, your phone is more powerful than the first 6 computers I owned.
And I got to say, now that what the features that Apple packs into its newest phones, which I don't have an iPhone 11, but I've played with one, and I am blown away with the things that, there you go, the things that you can do with an iPhone 11. And you really start to, I carry around a 5-pound Sony, well, the Sony itself is pretty light, but the lens I carry is, I carry around a lot of weight with me when I travel. And it's so I could capture images in that artistic way, or that more visually captivating way. And then I see what the iPhone 11 can do, and I just go, "Well, God, why would I carry around this 5-pound camera anymore? This phone does so much. It's incredible."
I put this funny meme up when I said, when you pack for travel, and then it shows a picture of like a backpack and some clothing. So it says, when I pack for travel, and it shows like the 2 camera bodies, the drone, like all the shit that I have to take when
one
I
pair of underwear.
Yeah, right. And it's like, it's cool that, you get to take a little light carry-on. I have to pack 3 things and carry 40 pounds of shit with me wherever I go to get the images that I get.
Exactly. And then you got the drone and the camera and the lenses and the tripod. And,
So I've been saying for years that the moment that Apple actually invents an attachment for the phone camera that allows us to do the kind of zooming in, if they actually, like, let's say they invent an L series glass lens for the iPhone, boom. There's 2 things they need to do. One, they need to create lens attachments that give us the power that photographers want in lens changing. And secondly, they need to invent shallow depth of field for video. The moment, and I know they're working out, but the moment that those features come out, the DSLR market is done. Because why would I ever carry a big camera when I can just take my phone and do everything on it?
Yeah, pretty much.
I can plug an external hard drive into it. I can record offline. Like there'd be no reason to ever buy another camera.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's
I welcome that day.
We're almost there.
So Robin, thank you for being awesome with technology. I love talking tech with you. We could do that all day.
Oh, I can nerd out all the time, anytime.
Yes. Maybe we'll do a whole tech podcast at some point.
Oh yes, count me in.
But so when I ask people about travel, we mostly talk about the physical travel of being out in the world, planes, trains, and stuff like that. And as you and I did last time, but this time I wanted to ask you about emotional travel and the experience of traveling through our human life, the travels of the spirit, basically. And so how do you feel about the sense of the human spirit in the world today? And are you a spiritual person? Do you believe in that kind of thing?
I am, except I've been feeling very disconnected from it. And my way of feeling spiritual is to get out and go camping. So I loaded up my adventure motorcycle and headed up into the high Sierra Mountains. Did all back roads and dirt roads and trails, and just got away from everyone. And
that sounds awesome.
I was crying. I was so happy because there was no noise. There was no sound except for just the sound of the wind in the trees. And I have a hammock tent, so I actually was sleeping really in the trees. And I just, and that's the first time I've felt spiritual in a very long time.
I think we all need to get back to nature to try to make the world a better place. I really mean that. I think you take even a walk in your local park, you go out to the woods, whatever, and you don't have to do anything crazy. You can just sit on a park bench and watch the world go by for a minute. Look at the clouds. I just think people do need to get back to nature a little more to reconnect with what it means to be human in our world.
Sometimes you don't even have to travel that far. If you don't have the time or the resources to get out and go travel internationally and go see a part of the world you haven't seen, sometimes all you need is a tent, a sleeping bag, and some backpacker food from REI where you just boil water and it's actually really good. And just take off for a night or two and go see the stars. That is something that is missing in our urban environments, is the stars. There's so much light pollution these days that you can't see the night sky anymore. There's something about looking up in the night sky and really being reminded about how incredibly small we are. I don't think we can really grow as a species or as a society until we are reminded about how small and universally insignificant we are. And when we are reminded of that, that's when I think we can achieve our greatest moments as a species.
Are you afraid of dying?
No, not at all. I mean, I ride a motorcycle, I fly helicopters. I'm definitely not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of a painful death. That would suck. But for some reason, death doesn't scare me.
What do you think is the purpose of life?
Well, I would think it's to absorb everything that the world has to offer, to make friends, fall in love, have wonderful pets that you treat as people and not as animals, and to experience. I think the purpose of our life is to experience. And then at the end of our lives, to be able to look back and smile at the experiences and the people that we had in our lives, and make sure that we make choices now so that when we do have that moment of reflection at the end of our life, that we're satisfied with it.
I agree. I think that's beautiful. Last question, Mr. Leabman.
All right.
What's your spirit animal?
It's the fro eagle. I don't know if you're aware of the fro eagle, but it's it looks a lot like a bald eagle, but it has this massive Jufro that I have, my pandemic hair. No, it's the bald eagle. I've always loved the bald eagle. It's a beautiful bird. I don't know. That's like the first answer that popped in my head was the bald eagle. I've always loved the bald eagle. Maybe that's because I grew up in Montana and there were bald eagles all over the place. And every time you saw one, it was a special treat. It was a moment. You're like, oh my God, there's a bald eagle.
Well, it also stands for freedom and
the bald eagle. Yeah, right. It is. It's a symbol of strength and freedom. And I hope that I'm embodying those things in my life.
All right. Robin, thank you so much for coming in again. Please continue to fly safely and give Karen our love. And thank you. Thank you very much for being here.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure coming back. And all my best to Jolene. And we're coming out of this thing. Keep it together, people. Keep it together.
Yes. Hang in there.
Yeah,
we're
hang
almost
in
there.
Keep showing the love and keep showing the support for all of our communities and even those communities that we're not a part of. And we're going to get through this, everyone.
Robin, have a great day.
All right, you too, buddy.
Friends and listeners, Jolene and I have a guinea pig named Double Stuff, and he wanted me to tell you that if you want more Moonbird in your life, and hey, who wouldn't? Head on over to memoriesofamoonbird.com or visit me on social media at Memories of a Moonbird. Isn't that right, Double Stuff?